And that comes from feeling unworthy and being made to feel unworthy as a child, which actually happens as a result of your needs not being met. Sometimes as well, fearful avoidants will constantly try to make sure that they seem good or innocent. And it's coming from this fear of feeling like a bad person, like, oh, I'm bad, I did the wrong thing, or this fear of people thinking you're a bad person. That usually comes from the result of feeling growing up like punishments were really severe. So you constantly had to avoid punishments and you constantly had to try to be good and prove that you were good so you wouldn't get in trouble. So that can be a really big wound. And then I will be abandoned. I will be trapped. I am helpless, powerless, out of control. These are big fears. You might find that when you feel helpless or like out of control in some way, you feel really frustrated. And then some other wounds, and these are not as big, but they can be a little bit of like feeling not good enough, feeling really triggered if you feel disrespected, when you're sad or your needs aren't met, feeling unloved, and also fearing being weak. So a lot of these are the big core wounds of fearful avoidance. And these are essentially like the big insecurities that you'll bring into relationships. And we could talk later about how to really recondition these things, but this is your roadmap. These are the things you need to know. A lot of the emotional patterns that fearful avoidance will tend to feel is they tend to have anger, hurt, feel frustrated, they feel trapped or helpless, get overwhelmed, feel overwhelmed. Fearful avoidants usually struggle with their boundaries, so they'll take on too much, and then they can feel pressured. And then sometimes they'll struggle with guilt and shame as well. And sometimes they'll feel offended if they feel disrespected. And they can struggle with low level, very quiet, but often consistent anxiety. Then if we look further at some of the different dynamics that can exist here, these are the major needs. And I want you to pay close attention to this. This is your roadmap. So you need to know your emotions, your core wounds, what you need as a fearful avoidant attachment style. These are usually things that light you up in relationships. And these are emotional depth, passion, trust, presence, safety, novelty, independence, growth, freedom, intimacy, and to feel wanted. And these are the needs. Like, this is the most important part I want you to focus on for today. And it's that when you know your needs in a relationship, you can have standards around them. So you can make sure you're seeking people who will meet these needs, and you can also share them. Like, it is so important to learn to communicate our needs. And when we don't communicate them, we don't give other people the information they need in order to be there for us in the way that we need. And so a lot of fearful avoidants, they have these kind of contradictory needs because they want like deep connection, but they also want freedom. And they might seem like opposing needs, but it doesn't mean that you can't have them both. Okay. It doesn't mean you can't have a relationship where you do new things together and you also have some time to yourself and you can take adventures and do things on your own time as needed. But when you're with your partner, you can have a lot of that emotional depth and deep connection and be really open and honest. And a lot of trust comes with transparency, feeling like your partner's open with you, they share things with you, they give you context for things if you feel kind of confused about something. Let's say they don't get back to you if they're like, hey, sorry, I was caught up at work doing XYZ. It can help you kind of feel more reassured. And I know sometimes fearful avoidants don't want to ask for those things because they can get kind of worried that they'll seem too possessive or too controlling. But it's also okay to just ask for context when you're dating somebody or learning about them. So we'll talk more about this at the end. Keep a close eye out because this slide here is the major slide that you'll want to go back and reflect on when we talk about the breakthroughs at the end. Another thing to note, fearful avoidants tend to really struggle with boundaries, and they may not really share or express their boundaries with others or even know that they have them. And then eventually when it's sort of like you're boundaryless, and you feel like there's all this emotional tension building up. And eventually you set a boundary from anger, and you might push people away out of anger. But I want to be really clear here and let you know that successful boundaries and being a good boundary setter doesn't mean setting boundaries from anger. A lot of fearful avoidants think, oh, I can set boundaries when I finally need to. And when they do, it's from anger. But if you're an angry boundary setter, it means there's so many times you didn't set boundaries first, to the point where then you use anger as a tool to be able to set a boundary. There's a much healthier way of communicating. And some of the fearful avoidant expectations that are here are like, some, like, in a relationship, nobody should ever break my trust. Nobody should ever lie. My romantic partner should give as much as I give. They should always respect my independence. They should always make me feel wanted. And this idea that the partner should never have any like lack of faithfulness in thought, emotion, opinion, action, not find somebody else attractive, any of those different things. And not all fearful avoidants have all of these, particularly the last one, but it's a quite common experience. And I want to let you know that these expectations are not necessarily bad things as standards. You know, some of them can be a little bit extreme, right? But it's when we don't communicate that these things are important to us, and when we don't properly vet partners when we're dating them to make sure that they have some of these things and who they are, that they are truthful, they are honest, they are giving. And then when they're not meeting different needs that we have, to be able to share and communicate that with other people as well is quite important. So let's look at some of the coping mechanisms fearful avoidants have. And again, this is your roadmap for like understanding yourself. You might find yourself testing people, especially if you hear them telling one story and then the story kind of changes the next day. You might find yourself withdrawing a lot to kind of decompress. Usually that's a representation of you feeling burnt out. You might find yourself stonewalling, sometimes being spiteful or critical or having emotional volatility, and kind of like using creature comforts to soothe yourself, like binging on television or food or gaming or alcohol or gambling, you know, especially when you're either kind of burnt out or going through a bit of a challenging time. And then some of that emotional volatility can show up for fearful avoidance quite strongly. So in summary here, I want you to understand your major roadmap, okay? The core wounds that you have, which are really the insecurities you have in relationships, your needs, some of the emotions you'll feel, and then the different coping mechanisms and behaviors that you'll have. And as well as relationship expectations. Once you understand this, I want you to now see, when we go through some of the other ones at a very high level for the different attachment styles, how we have like literally that different set of rules I was talking about, like playing a board game with a totally different set of rules, and how that creates such confusion. So dismissive avoidants, they tend to be quite logical, rational, distant, grounded, practical, slow to warm up, very guarded, very slow moving in a relationship. And they tend to be very disconnected from their emotions and repress them quite often. Some of the core wounds that they struggle with are: I am defective, I am unsafe, I will be trapped, I'm incapable of change, I will be weak if I open up, I'm not good enough, I am helpless. And a lot of these things are leading to them feeling really sensitive to criticism, believe it or not. Even though they won't show it on the outside, they're so sensitive to criticism, more than any other attachment style deep down. And they feel a lot of shame very easily. And then they struggle to feel safe a lot. And they might present as strong, but they always avoid people because they don't really feel that safe around people. They usually are kind of like on edge. And that can really show up as irritation, frustration, some of these annoyed feelings. So you'll see like shame, low level anxiety, irritation, impatience, frustration, annoyance, or feeling annoyed, feeling drained, overwhelmed. Like these are a lot of the emotional patterns for the DA. And a lot of their needs in relationships are around autonomy, independence, freedom, appreciation, acknowledgement, understanding from their partner, feeling accepted, feeling supported. By the way, as I'm saying these, try to think of who you know in your life who's a dismissive avoidant. Is it a parent of yours? Is it one of your children if you have kids? Is it a family member? Is it a close friend? And you couldn't understand why they were constantly unavailable or pulled away? Or is it your partner or somebody you've perhaps dated in the past? Like, really try to take a look, because it will help you understand them and some of their differences and why you kept having friction. They tend to really value harmony. They want relationships to be easy. They don't like fighting. Fighting will push a dismissive avoidant away and cause them to really shut down, because they feel really helpless around conflict. And even if they don't show, how much it's affecting them, they don't outwardly say it, they really get affected by it. It can really cause a relationship to wear away for them. They really need time to decompress. Peace, certainty, safety, and stability are really important, and they want a very easy, consistent, healthy, harmonious relationship. They tend to set more extreme boundaries than other attachment styles, kind of like just cancel plans altogether. And they'll often set boundaries and communicate more with their actions than their words, which can be really confusing for a fearful avoidant. They tend to always expect that a partner should be consistently understanding whenever you need space, or whenever they need space, I mean. They tend to think conflict should never occur, that Being with a partner shouldn't mean making compromises. And they tend to believe that each partner should meet their own needs and then kind of come together once they're both in a good spot and their needs are met. And they tend to fear people relying on them. And they struggle with like imperfections of their partner, literally because they're afraid to talk things through. So they keep searching for this like perfect partner, and for somebody to have all perfect qualities, which obviously there's no such thing, because they don't know how to work through conflict. Like healthy relationships, we're going to have things that are not perfect. And then we're going to learn to talk about those things so that we can figure out a way to still make it work for both of us. And that's part of the evolution of a relationship. But dismissive avoidants tend to really struggle with this. And they fear losing their independence. They often withdraw to compress. They can ignore, they can dismiss people, they can be passive aggressive, they may stonewall. I know passive aggression can be a big trigger for fearful avoidance and kind of get under your skin. They can numb, avoid, and they usually have a lot of creature comforts as well. So DAs are very avoidant, right? Now let's look at anxious preoccupieds. Anxious preoccupieds tend to be very charismatic, kind, warm and friendly, and quite likable, very attentive in close relationships, and move quickly in relationships. They always want to move fast. So again, as we're doing this, try to think of the roadmap of somebody in your life. Like, who's your anxious preoccupied friend, or which of your parents might be anxious preoccupied and always want more closeness and proximity and kind of fear abandonment, or which sibling that you have, or if you have children, which one of your kids. Like, try to look at this because it will help you see where their behavior really comes from. And once you kind of understand the roadmaps of others, it's easy to apply those breakthrough tools at the end. APs tend to fear abandonment. They fear feeling really unsafe when they're alone. They really don't like being alone because they constantly, as children, feared somebody abandoning them. So it's this really deep-rooted nervous system, body response they have to fearing being disconnected from others. They fear rejection, being unloved, excluded, and disliked. And again, you can see like how these fears differ so much from the big fears and insecurities of the dismissive avoidant, right? They feared being shamed or criticized or being trapped or helpless or incapable or not good enough. And the anxious preoccupied, a lot of their fears are about their relationship to other people. So you can see some of those big differences. They tend to feel sad, lonely, insecure, afraid, anxious. They tend to worry. They can experience desperation if they think somebody's pulling away, and regret. And some of the big needs they have that are so important, this is the roadmap of their needs, is love, intimacy, closeness, connection. They really seek validation and reassurance and approval from other people. And they want to be seen as like important. They tend to really value certainty, consistency, presence. They really want people to be present with them when they're around them. They want to feel seen and heard and understood. And fearful avoidance can have a little bit of that too, really wanting to feel like heard and understood and connected. And then APs as well tend to really value inclusion, community, collaboration, and teamwork. Now, APs tend to have really bad boundaries. You know how we said fearful avoidance will have no boundaries and then eventually set them from anger? Anxious preoccupieds, they tend to just be boundaryless. They just tend to struggle with their boundaries all the time because they just want closeness to others. And that's like their primary focus. So they'll keep focusing on being boundaryless and just gaining closeness as much as they can. And they tend to really have expectations around their partner being the one to soothe them and meet their needs and always being available and making the relationship the highest priority and giving romantic gestures and knowing what I want and being there to reassure me and give me certainty. And so they tend to expect that all of their needs will be met by their partner, which again, we need balance there. Like, healthy interdependency means, that's like the healthy version of relationships, means I can meet my needs and I can ask for my needs too. And it can really go both ways. And I have multiple people I can rely on my needs being met from. But APs tend to really focus on their needs being met from the romantic partner most specifically. So important to pay attention to. Now, they tend to cling. They tend to try to provoke a response from their partner sometimes to test them, to see if they care about them. They tend to seek validation and approval, and they may criticize their partner sometimes or really people please a lot. That's what fawning means. It's like a fawning response. They can really, people please and kind of pretend to be something other than they are. So then we have our secure partner, and we'll go through this one at a very high level. Basically, a secure person, they don't really have many core wounds in particular. They grow up with enough stability in their childhood where they don't have all these major core wounds, and so they won't have a lot of these different like painful coping mechanisms, they tend to instead just feel generally like what they're looking for in a relationship in terms of the needs is balance, harmony, peace, connection, communication. They want to work through problems and talk about them and hash them out. And they tend to have really healthy boundaries overall. So now what I want to take you through here, okay, is probably one of the most important parts of this is what do you do with all this information? Now, I know I went through this quite quickly, but you have this roadmap with the slides and the notes, right? So you can literally go back and reflect on this at any time. But what I want to take you through here is just how you can really use this information going forward. So if we take a look, um, here are some things that you want to take a look at. Number one, you want to go back through and you can rewind to your attachment style, but you want to look at like, what are your top 3 needs? Like those things that are important to you for a relationship that will make you happy, that you're looking for. You want to know these things inside out. And if you're single and you're starting to date, you want to know what your needs are, and then you want to make sure that you're asking questions when dating somebody to see if they'll meet those needs. So, for example, if trust and loyalty are important to you, on a date, you might say, hey, are trust and loyalty important to you? How do you feel about that in a relationship? Or if your independence, having your independence is important to you in a relationship, you might share on a date, hey, I'm somebody who really values deep connection, but I also really care about my independence. And are you good with that? Like, how do you feel about that? So by sharing those things from your top 3 needs, and talking about people that way or talking to people that way, I mean, you can vet people properly and you can see, right? Is this person going to be a fit? So now you're dating consciously. And when you know your needs, you can start setting standards around your needs. Like, I'm not going to invest my time dating somebody who's not going to meet my needs. Our standards are going to be what make relationships likely to succeed. So when you know your needs, now you can communicate your needs to other people. You can share the rules that you're playing by with somebody who has a different rule book. And now you can see, will this person show up or will they not? And that will help you to date consciously by knowing yourself, by understanding yourself and what you're looking for. And it will massively increase the chances of you having a successful dating experience. And also when you share your needs, now people can meet them. They can show up for you. They can be loyal. They can respect your independence if that's what you're needing. They can connect more deeply with you because they know you care about those things. And one of the biggest things that fearful avoidants struggle with is they often don't share their needs because it feels too vulnerable, but that's your work. Your work is to communicate those needs. Now, before we go to point B here, if you're in a relationship, this is arguably even more massive, because if you're in a relationship and you're not as happy as you want to be, one of the major causal factors for this is because you probably don't know your needs enough and you're not communicating about them enough and giving your partner the chance to meet them. And so when our needs are not met, it's one of the biggest things that drives success in relationships is our needs being met. When we feel like our needs are met by our partner, we feel so happy in the relationship and so fulfilled. When somebody doesn't know our needs and they're not meeting them, we feel resentful, frustrated, we flip-flop, we second-guess relationships. All of those things take place. So then you have to assess, and this brings me to point B. Am I communicating my needs? And what is a daily strategy to improve this in my relationship or my dating experience, right? So how can I communicate? Can I tell my partner that, freedom's really important to me? Or if novelty is important, can I tell my partner, hey, I want to do new things together? Like try new restaurants, go for a road trip, like let's try new things. Or if it's, this need for depth and closeness, can you say to your partner, hey, I need a lot more deepening of our connection. I need more consistency there. Like, how can you have this conversation to improve this? And then the next part is, and by the way, if you're dating somebody and you're seeing people, have those conversations early, right? Let people know, hey, for me, I'm looking for in a relationship somebody who understands my need for freedom, independence, but also cares about deep connection. And by sharing that early, if people are like, yeah, I'm good with that, I see that, I support that, I like that too, you're more likely to be with somebody that's the right match for you. And you're less likely to be wasting your time with the wrong people and then finding that out way down the line and feeling frustrated and defeated. And then you can ask yourself, how am I taking these needs away from myself? And how can I change this? Something that's so interesting is sometimes when we have big needs, we rob ourselves from them at the same time. Like maybe you take away your freedom and your feeling of having a sense of freedom in your life because you overcommit to things. Or maybe you want to feel wanted and cared for, but maybe you put yourself down and don't properly care for yourself. Usually, what we're seeking from others in our relationships is something that we're actually not giving to ourselves, and we're kind of sabotaging by accident. So I want you to take a moment and evaluate, like, am I sabotaging these needs in my life? Like these things that are important to me, am I really showing up for them, or am I kind of sabotaging them from time to time? And you have to hone in on that. And if you see yourself doing that, you have to work on that. And then what I want you to ask yourself is, who am I in? Who am I in a relationship with, or dating? Like, what attachment style is that person essentially that I'm seeing? Okay, so if you're seeing somebody, or you're just dating them, or you're getting to know